So memory politics has everything to do with democracy and inclusion because memory politics is a special kind of politics. And in many ways, it's like other kinds of politics. It's been deployed by people of different political, I'll say, persuasions to change the world in ways that they want to see changed. I think what separates memory politics from other kind of politics is that memory, the appeal to memory has a particular resonance and a kind of an emotional hold on people that other kinds of political references to, even self-interest and economics, doesn't have that same emotional connection to them. So that you can use a slogan like "Make America Great Again," and that slogan conjures up a world to the people that Donald Trump is speaking to. Just that one line connects to a whole imaginary, idyllic world in the past where white people were served by people of color, and white men kind of controlled white women and white women's bodies. So the politics of memory works for the right, but also works for the left. And I guess I'd like to make an argument that the politics of memory, whether it's deployed on the right or the left, has little actual reference to history. It has reference to kind of a cartoon version of the past. So again, thinking about, we'll say, Trumpy Republicans, and in Canada we have an echo of that in white supremacist groups and other organizations. The notion that the past was an idyllic time and that liberal progressive changes have ruined the world. And this imaginary time, of course, never existed. And if you challenge that view of the past with historical evidence about progressives, people making changes in the 1920s, or the horrors of fascism, it doesn't affect this vision of the past, which is not essentially historical. It's an imagined past. So that's a threat to democracy, particularly when it comes from the right. But the left has its own version of that, and I don't like left and right necessarily as names, but just for the purpose of simplicity, there's a progressive left, we'll say, which also invokes the politics of memory. And in extreme versions of this, and this is a bit of a caricature of some of the descriptions, but in extreme versions of this, colonialism is all bad. Everything that happened in, say, North and South America by colonialists was bad. And so the past was racist, it was homophobic, it was gendered for males. It was a horrible place, and we have to reject the past and embrace a new future. So that also rejects history, as history is, it's not interested in the details of those people in the past who challenged racism, about the subtleties of colonial policies, about in rejecting colonialism, it has the danger of rejecting all of those things that make our democratic society here that came from the colonial powers. I think there's a threat to democracy from both sides, because on the left there's an attempt to stifle debate about the past, and there's an attempt to protect everybody's feelings that we're too fragile today to have a serious discussion and debate about the past. And so we can't bring up harmful things about the past. It's a trigger warning. We can't talk about those kind of things. So I think there's a threat to the democratic space from both the right and the left, much more pressing and dangerous and ominous on the right now, because they're really trying to basically prevent democracy and democratic discourse, and essentially in certain versions of say the American Republican Party, they're just trying to replace democracy entirely. But there's a third threat to democracy that comes from this divergence of politics of memory. And this is this kind of what I'll call, even though again I don't like this metaphor so much, the disappearing middle. With the election of Trump and the kind of empowerment of right-wing media and social media in the United States, And people starting to watch that media in large numbers. I don't know what the numbers are, but more than half of Americans listen to Fox News and kind of right-wing media. It's actually drawing people. They're believing what they're hearing and reading. It's drawing them over to the right. At the same time, that same media is pushing people who might be kind of not politically aligned off to the left because they're rejecting the politics of the right. And it's making the left more extreme and the right more extreme. And the place in the middle, the democratic, I'd say, center in the middle where people can meet and have discussions about the past and what it means and what from the past we want to bring into the future and what from the past we want to leave behind. Those debates don't happen, let me say they happen less and less. So I'd see three threats to democracy. The one, the kind of really ominous threat from the right, which is to basically take rights away, using memory politics to take rights away from minority groups. The threat from the left, which is to stifle discussion and avoid, I think, debate, and the threat from that disappearing middle, which is essential for a democracy. It's the role of historians to inject history into that debate. It's the role of professionals, historians, political scientists, others who are engaged in studying the past in a serious way to bring that into the public discourse. That is in fact our role. And I think we played that role, thinking of myself as in the academy, successfully until the late 1990s and the arrival of social media, where the notion of expert knowledge starts to become challenged and undermined. And of course, there are many other ways of. There were problems with expert knowledge as well, and the monopoly that white males had in dominating that discourse and correcting, I would say, extreme views on the left and the right. But it also came with its own bias. It's a positive thing that the Academy has expanded, that Indigenous and Black and women and other groups previously excluded are part of that cohort now. But that knowledge is so easily and quickly swamped by a single tweet that I fear that as much as we try, and I see that as my role, is wherever I can, jumping into the public sphere. But I do so with a certain trepidation and fear that, if I'm taken the wrong way, a social media bomb of a barrage will land on my doorstep. And, in Canada, I don't feel this danger, but in the United States, you would feel a threat to your safety from social media attacks. And actually, a few of my colleagues here expressed that fear. So with that, add that fear to the fact that expert knowledge is heavily discounted in the commons these days. It is a danger for democracy. Yeah, so if the question is, there's something new about memory politics, I would say yes and no. The no part is that memory politics has always been part of politics. And, I'm not an historian of the far past, but, Hitler used memory politics. Mussolini used memory politics. Erdogan uses memory politics. Netanyahu uses memory politics. It's how we kind of, in effect, make nations, is make up stories about the past and tell those stories and get people to believe them. So I don't think using memory politics is new. I think it came to the fore in North America with the election of Donald Trump and the reaction of some groups to start tearing down statues in the United States, and the attention to memory politics as memorialized by statues and place names and stuff has spilled into Canada, and I think has put it more on our agenda than maybe it was. When you tear down a statue, you tear down a symbol, and it becomes something to discuss. But what is new, I think, is the social media amplification of that. And, thinking of threats to democracy, it was essentially more of that destatuing. This happened by, and I'll call them mobs, who are representing progressive views, wanting to tear down in an undemocratic way statues and symbols, rather than the right, who hasn't not maybe they're satisfied with the statuary and symbols that are out there. But to the extent that these are anti-democratic actions where a small group of often youth go out and tear down a symbol, where I think, in our democracies, we need a process by which to take statues down and rename places. So one can imagine a democratic forum, city council, provincial name registries, various places where you could democratically make an argument this name is no longer suits us and we don't want it. But the alternative is direct action and just go take the statue down or deface the place name.